Good morning and welcome to This Week in Work Hard Pittsburgh. I am Josh Lucas, the chair of the executive committee, and this is
avid Sean Paul listener Zabriawn Smith.
And together we are the podcasters for today. And behind the camera we have Ryan Haggerty, and on audio we have Tyler. So thanks to those guys for pulling this together every week and then taking the time to chop it up and edit it down. So couple things of note that came out of our Friday chairperson meeting that we'll just go through real quick. It's always important to remember that the next session of Academy Pittsburgh is going to wrap up here in mid-May. So how can the membership help with that, Zabriawn? Like what should folks be doing?
As always, just being mindful of opportunities as they arise. If you hear of anything such as hiring opportunities, or if you know a friend that's in a tech space or has a tech job already, always good to be able to connect alums with people who are already in the technology sector who can either provide mentorship or helpful tips with resumes. So we're always looking to grow our network and build it up. So if you have anyone that you know, or if you yourself are one of those people, always great to just reach out and just see where you can connect with some of these alums, because, you know, sometimes they just graduate and they are looking for opportunities.
Yeah. So if you hear of a job, drop that job posting into the recruiting channel on Element. We use that recruiting channel not just for web developer jobs, but other stuff as well. So if you're looking to pick up full-time employment and some 1099 work gets posted there, drop into that recruiting channel. It's hashtag recruiting, I think, is how you find it on Element. And then we unfortunately had a couple COVID scares this week, so we're back to masks on here at Work Hard Pittsburgh for a little bit. So go get your vaccine, and just always be mindful that bad luck can happen to anybody. So we need to be a little bit cautious. The COVID scare was mainly at the residency. But because some people that work the residency shifts come up here and also do media stuff, that created another exposure. None of that actually resulted in additional COVID cases, but we just never know. There's also a Work Hard Pittsburgh member meetup coming up here May 15th outside at Shiloh Gastropub. So that'll be fun, right? We'll be able to do a little socializing. So we'd encourage you guys all to come out and hang out and tell us your stories of post-vaccination illnesses and feeling bad.
And there's been a lot of speculation, and I just want to let everyone know that there will be food at this meetup.
And booze.
Yes, and booze.
So I think this week we're going to talk just a little bit about our historic success with Philanthropy.
Okay.
And also just what we're hoping to accomplish in the next couple months here with Philanthropy. You know, we're a weird organization and a lucky one, and you might even say kind of cool and talented too, because we've been able to tell a story of multiple impact-driven for-profits, 2 foundations here in town, and they have distributed close to $2.3 million of philanthropy into this ecosystem since about 2014 or so, maybe 2013. Yeah, so can you speak to why that's interesting and not typical? Do you think that's something you could address?
Yeah, a little bit. So just in general, most foundations are going to provide grants to nonprofit organizations because that's part of their mission, right? So what's different about Work Hard Pittsburgh is that we are a mission-driven for-profit, which means that we are looking for avenues to achieve sustainability. We are looking for ways to increase revenue in the way that any other for-profit would be doing, but we also have principles in which we try to stay within the guidelines of that have to do with improving the equality of opportunity, the equality of capacity in individuals. And for that reason, a lot of these foundations have taken a liking to us. That and the fact that Josh is just a natural snake charmer by trade. So it allows for us to have a little bit more maneuverability with the things that we want to do. I think in the last 2 years, we have been kind of tightening ship a little bit and focusing more on those avenues of sustainability and figuring out how to get to that. I don't know, Josh, if you could speak a little bit more to that part of it, might help give us some more insight.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that the fundamental reason why foundations don't do grants to for-profits is because the IRS doesn't let them, because there are protections in place that the federal government has built into law that requires philanthropic money to go to social good. So a foundation couldn't give, Elon Musk $1 million because that would be putting cash into the pocket of an individual. This is also why foundations historically have not been able to directly pay for tuition for Academy Pittsburgh students because some interpretations of tax law suggest that is not for a social good, that it would be a benefit to a person, and that violates their charter and that violates their tax status as a philanthropic organization. But to Zabriawn's point, circling back, like we know that we got to get off of philanthropic money as the primary mechanism to get us through our cash flow, right? To get us to a place where we can be operational. It's interesting, over the years, like we've been able to really push forward progressive and novel ways for philanthropy to invest in us. Our very first engagements with like Neighborhood Allies and Hillman were direct grants to us. So we did that in partnership with the fiscal sponsor so that money first goes to New Sun Rising. New Sun Rising is then the fiduciary who's responsible for oversight to make sure that I just didn't take that money and buy a Cybertruck with it, though there weren't Cybertrucks then.
Though there's a lot of social good in buying Cybertrucks.
But that oversight that New Sun Rising provides gave the foundations early on comfort in investing in these impact-driven for-profits like Academy Pittsburgh. And then as time went on, we pushed for different mechanisms of funding because that grant money is very constrained and very constrictive. It's essentially benchmarked to do a specific thing, and it has a budget, and you can't deviate off of sort of the funding buckets of that budget. So if we said, $100,000 was for physical classroom space, and $100,000 was for staffing, and $100,000 was for snacks and beer, we would not be able to ever change those numbers without first approval from the foundation. So it was very constrictive, right? It's just very hard to use that money in a way that was giving us operational security.
And can I add a point to that?
Yeah.
So, part of the difficulty as Work Hard Pittsburgh, the ecosystem, is the fact that there exists multiple entities within it, right? So being able to understand that the entire ecosystem relies in part on itself being sustainable on individual entity levels is kind of an important thing to remember when we talk about raising funds for this organization, right? So if they provide grants to just Academy Pittsburgh and then the rest of the ecosystem falls apart, well, then Academy Pittsburgh to some degree also falls to the wayside in that effort. So there's always this delicate balance that we are trying to achieve of making sure that the organization or the ecosystem rather as a whole is sustainable so that these individual mission-driven for-profit businesses can still exist.
That's a great point. And when it's a grant, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to shuffle that money around between entities because it really is assigned to a particular entity in the ecosystem.
Right. And we never, when it is earmarked in that manner, we never go outside of those bounds, obviously. So, we just kind of manage to survive on what we do have from those areas while these ones are thriving. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's like if you got one long leg and one short leg, you just kind of little foot, long foot it, about.
Yeah, exactly. So the second interesting and novel mechanism that we developed in partnership with these philanthropic organizations was a grant to New Sun Rising and then a contract back to us. So it was essentially a fee for service business transaction, which is great because then we get rid of these constrictive budgets, right? If we're just doing a service for New Sun Rising, then how we use that money isn't exactly earmarked for a specific budgetary bucket. That's hard to say. So probably 2018, 2017, we started seeing those kind of awards. And those were super helpful because now with that money, if it comes into Academy and say the agency, WH Digital, is short of cash, there can be a loan between entities that makes sure that all of the operational bits that are interconnected stay sort of fused and moving forward in an organized way.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the reason it is that we are able to use that mechanism is because at the end of the day, the outcomes that are desired by those foundations are still achieved.
Yeah, that's where the accountability comes in. So New Sun Rising stops being a fiscal agent, having fiduciary responsibility, and they just become a programmatic checks and balances, right? Doing checks and balances on programmatic stuff. So the risk there is that if we didn't deliver on the promised outcomes and outputs, then New Sun Rising could elect not to contract us to do, say, year 2 of that grant cycle, and they would go find a different vendor. So that's cool. So we are. It's important to not underestimate how these sort of new mechanisms for engaging philanthropy are culture changing and impact the region, not just us, but other entities in a real way. It's demonstrating new and novel ways to kind of like move forward, impact driven work without the constraints and bureaucracy that sometimes comes with a nonprofit. Right. The third way that we've been able to engage philanthropy that is also novel is in the form of forgivable loans. So 2019 saw the first batch of loans that came through that were tied to outcomes to be forgiven. And this was also one that was associated with Academy Pittsburgh. It basically said that for every person we train and get a job, or was it just train? I think it was train and get a job. I'd have to go back and look. It's been a while. They would forgive $8,000 or $9,000 the cost of the training off of the principal of the loan. And so we were able to take in $450,000 as a loan, mitigate the foundation's risk, because if we fail to deliver the programming, we'd owe them the money, right? So that's helpful for them and helpful for them to push this through their board and their approval committees. And again, novel. As far as I know, rarely done, if not never done in the region, this kind of engagement with philanthropy. So those are the 3 ways that we've done it historically. Do you feel comfortable talking about what we're trying to do now as far as the 4th mechanism around equity?
No.
Okay, cool. That's a good answer. I don't know that I'm comfortable with it either, because it's still very much in development. But we're on track, hopefully, for the most difficult one to get the foundations to execute on, which is a direct investment in one of these LLCs. So what that would mean is,
could you pause and not to break up your flow? These LLCs.
Which LLC or all? Is that the question?
Like explain, what do you mean by these LLCs?
Oh yeah. So this ecosystem has 5-ish, maybe more than that, 6-ish operational separate businesses that are their own unique tax entities. So Academy Pittsburgh is an LLC. It's its own business. WH Digital is a corporation. It's an S Corp. It's not an LLC, but it's its own business. Work Hard Pittsburgh is an LLC. It's its own business. Hilltopless Holdings is its own LLC. That's the real estate company. And then underneath Hilltopless Holdings, there's other LLCs for each individual physical property, just to protect us to shelter risk, right? To consolidate risk in an LLC.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're asking philanthropy now to essentially buy shares or units of specific LLCs and come on board as an investment partner, much the way an angel investor or venture capitalist would for a startup. Yeah, and lots of upside there, right? Like the advantage there. Do you have any sense of what that might be? Like doing something novel like that?
I mean, if I had to take a guess, One of the biggest benefits would be having that partner there. Kind of, I don't know a better way to say it. It ties them into the success of the programming and really the success of the entire venture. I think one of the things that everyone is always trying to do in working with philanthropic institutions is find a way in order to establish long-term relationships. I think that one of the immediate benefits that I hear from a direct equity investment means that they are not only investing in maybe like the idea, but the idea becoming established and the idea becoming institutional in and of itself, right? So one of the beneficial qualities of institutions, philanthropic institutions, are the fact that they're not going anywhere. You know, all of these big names and all of these names that are kind of etched into history are always going to exist. And being able to find some programming or some physical locations that are attached to those names that are kind of forever endowed with the ability to do that social good allows for the positive feedback loops that we want to create so that we can kind of have long-term generational change. But that's just my first thought.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. It's basically, it's if you can get philanthropy to commit in this way, you're getting a better commitment around their network, around their storytelling, around their narrative. Like you're really binding them as an investor into something that has a higher sort of obligation to them than just like, here's some money, kids, have fun with it, right?
And part of the difficulty is, or rather part of the adventure here is that some people are into binding and some people are not into binding. And, you know, you don't pass judgment on anybody. Everybody's entitled to the degree of binding that they're into, you know?
Yeah, it's risk, right? It's real risk for them just because they value their perception in the public, deeply. And who knows what crazy stuff this LLC would do, right?
Exactly.
So that's sort of one of the benefits. The other benefit kind of references back to all the other sort of novel things that we've done with philanthropy for the last couple of years. It's, unrestricted funds that we can use however we want. It sort of more cleanly puts the money into our bank account without the need for a fiscal sponsor. And we love New Sun Rising, and they'll always be a partner of us, but they do have fees, and those fees, they're not bad. They have high value to us. They're really useful for us to pay those fees to get those services in return. But it's also nice to not have those fees levied on money coming in. And just generally, like having that money come in, so just generally that money is likely to be larger amounts than what you would see as a straight up grant done by regional philanthropy. But this isn't without obstacles, and this is honestly the hardest thing that we've ever tried to do with philanthropy. We've been trying to do this for about 4 years. We've been pitching this idea that foundations should be equity investors, excuse me, in the entities that we operate. Is a hard thing for them to do because it triggers evaluation that is comparable to what an angel investor or what a venture capitalist might do when investing in a business. And that's going to come from sort of their CFO level and not their philanthropic giving board members. So it really is something that they historically, regionally don't do. There are other national examples of this, but we hope that this is the year. And if it is, that'll be, we think, good for us. We think that'll be good for other impact-driven for-profits in the region because we're, again, like setting the standard and showing people how to do it. And we think it's going to be good for philanthropy because, like, we honestly believe that these ecosystems can be profitable. And if they're profitable, that means that they're not just giving a grant and then that money's gone forever. Like, they're investing in something that will likely replenish their grant-giving funds over time as well. So, yeah, it's all around. We think it's a win-win-win-win. I don't have
which is similar to really how the rest of, so like foundations have these giving arms, but then the rest of it is kind of driven towards investing in certain ventures, whether that be a stock portfolio that kind of mitigates their risk and ensures that they're going to last forever, Or, I imagine at this point there are some foundations that are at least looking at like things like a cryptocurrency or something to that effect, but they already invest in venture capital, and they already invest in hedge funds and real estate portfolios, real estate based hedge funds, all of those things. So in that regard, it's kind of hoping to show that in the same way that there is an upside to doing these really strictly just monetarily motivated investments, there's the same kind of benefit to a properly structured for-profit mission designed to be sustainable in that same way, right? So it may not 10x, but it will go a certain, it'll do its job.
Yeah, if it 2x's, that's better than just giving somebody grant money.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really an important point. The mechanism and the source of these funds, we think, is likely out of the endowment. That endowment is where the foundations keep billions of dollars in the NASDAQ and the stock market and hedge funds and all sorts of diversified investments. That's where their giving comes from, right? They have a large portfolio of profit-driving investments, and then the profit is what they give away every year. So we want
a percentage of the profit.
We want a percentage of the endowment, right? Like we want the endowment to not just be invested in fossil fuels through hedge funds, but also through local entrepreneurial activities that can return reasonable rates of return, reasonable profits. And I think that's good. I think we should just stop there. I feel like that was a lot.
Word.
So where can they find this? I guess it's silly to tell them where they can find it, because if they're listening to it, that means they've already found it.
Yeah, for the most part. But I think that's like one of those things that you still have to do.
Oh.
So if you are looking for Work Hard Pittsburgh and Work Hard Pittsburgh affiliated social media content, you may go to google.com, type in Work Hard Pittsburgh, 3 words, all spelled correctly, and just knock yourself out. There's at least 80 pages of it. They're going to cache all your searches. So if you just Google it and then go somewhere else, it'll pop up in an advertisement or something.
It's true. And then if you like watching this on TV, like an old person, you can watch it on YouTube. If you prefer to listen to it on a podcast, Spotify and Libsyn. And again, thanks to the media side of folks who do all the hard work. And get your vaccination, motherfuckers.